Okay. Can we start? Yes? Good. Okay, good morning. Again, thank you for being with us today. So today we are going to discuss about AI for the CFOs and how the CFOs or the finance directors are leveraging AI for their function, for their companies. Let me first introduce myself. So I have two hats. I am in charge of the French CFO association called DFCG when it regards all the digital transformation, AI, RPA, all these good things. And DFCG is about 3,500 members in France and in Europe. So that's my first hat. And my second hat is I was called one day by Marco Landi, who is the founder of the Europe AI Institute, and he asked me to represent the CFOs within this institute. So I am what they say the expert for CFOs, for finance with this institute. Okay, so enough about me. So before we start, let me ask my co-panelists to introduce themselves. So maybe Raphaël.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, or yeah, almost good afternoon. My name is Raphaël. I'm a CFO. My career has been mostly with a consumer good business, with companies like Unilever or Coty, and most recently with Veleda.
Thank you. Denis.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Denis Sasser. I'm a group finance director for a Swiss-based company called Fritz Hoffmann La Roche, which is a large pharmaceutical company. And my job specifically is really to look with a team of around 20 finance professionals after all the financial matters for our headquarter facilities, which are mainly in Basel. So it's an organization that hosts 12,000 people in various functions like R&D, manufacturing, group functions, divisional management. And the organization that we are supporting from the financial perspective is an organization of roughly 1,200 people, really covering the entire value chain from very basic services of the facilities up to very complex construction developments of what we, for instance, recently opened an R&D center that hosts 1,200 scientists. So that's what the organization is covering and what I'm responsible for from a financial perspective.
Thank you. Massimo?
Thank you, Roman. Massimo Giannetto, working for ᴛᴏᴏ, which is a Dutch conglomerate in the paints and coatings, so chemical industry. There I'm a business planning director, so it's not exactly a finance role. I have a background in finance, I studied in finance, and I'm taking care of the planning function, mostly, so demand. But one of my goals is to integrate demand with the finance planning. So there's a lot of interaction between my function and finance. That's why I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let me, before we really start with questions, let me maybe give a snapshot of where we are with AI in the CFO function. As you all know, we have two types of AI, predictive and generative. And the CFOs, they always wanted to be more effective, more efficient, to automate, to reduce cost, for themselves and for their companies. So when we saw after Excel, we saw RPA coming, which allowed us not to talk to the CIOs. We really jumped into RPA to automate, to be more efficient. But then we realized we still have to talk to the CIOs because RPA is a software. And then came AI, predictive AI, and we are using predictive AI to detect frauds, to do account reconciliation, to do cash posting, because we trust predictive AI because it's about math, probabilities, algorithm. We know what's inside the box. And then came Gen AI. And Gen AI, as we all know, is full of, at least so far, is still full of hallucinations. And as CFOs, we cannot go to the market and say, oh, this is our result for the month. but maybe it's 50-50. So we have a problem. And while we were maybe the first to use RPA to be more productive and efficient, now with AI, Gen AI, we are maybe lagging if we compare with other functions like sales, marketing, and so on. So this is where we are. At least this is what we see as in average in our functions. But having said that, it's best to see it from the ground. That's why I would like to ask my co-panelists to tell us more where they are with AI and how they started. So maybe, again, with Raphael. So where are you with AI and how did you start?
Yeah, so actually, last year in the summer, we all had the ChatGPT, wake-up call, right? And that created a bit of a sense of urgency. And all of a sudden, everyone in the company wanted to use, I mean, not everyone, but quite a few people wanted to use ChatGPT to translate or to do any kind of things. And then that created for us a challenge in terms of security. No one wanted to have, and it's a common theme, right? No one wanted to have their data really go outside of the company. So we very quickly said, okay, we need to have our own ChatGPT, right? So so last year, very quickly, actually, we developed, we took the technology of OpenAI and we developed our internal ChatGPT. It's called We Ask. We Ask, and you can ask anything. So that was the first step to get the technology really in the hands of as many people as possible, because you mentioned, reduce cost, but I was thinking, we want to improve productivity, improve decision making, and we want to develop the people and make them grow so that they can use modern tools, right? So that was like the first phase. And now what we've been doing over the past year is really to develop more specialized application. And we can talk about that later. But in R&D, for example, in medical science, to accelerate the development of new products, to get a wider access to all of the knowledge we have internally. And now we are going into finance, actually. And I remember, last year we had the discussion, and I said I would not trust anything, in terms of numbers, because I had done some test, and we had it, it was wrong. And now I would say that the technology is really, improved a lot. And having trained the model internally, I see really less and less of those hallucinations. But I would say that the human is always at the center, at the beginning and at the end, right? For feeding the model, teaching the model, and then prompting, and then questioning, and then reviewing the results, right? So you need always to have it's a tool to empower really the human capabilities. So that's the way we think about it here.
Thank you, Denis. How did you start?
Yeah, how did I start? I would say because maybe that's the one thing, as you are part of a big conglomerate, a big corporate structure, it's sometimes more that you are following the trend, right? So what did we do as a company? I mean, exactly the same question, right? The wake-up call was there, then the big question, what are we going to do about it? And also as we are, like the core value creation lies in bringing innovation into the hands of patients, right? So that's what is in our DNA, that we can't really ignore wherever technology is heading us or leading us into a certain direction. So what we did as a company is really to say, let's acknowledge the fact and let's try to build out that infrastructure, right? Looking at what are the large language models that are out there, but then also taking into consideration, and that's what Raphael pointed out, is even more important when it comes close to R&D activities. How do you make sure that your intellectual property is safeguarded, right? And how do you also make sure in your processes that it really follows a very strict, compliant approach in terms of running trials, running your operations, which are also in a GMP environment. So there are very high, let's say, requirements that you need to follow with a very innovative technology. But specifically what we did is really to establish an internal chat program, internal large language model that we really provided to all our internal employees. And I would say it's more to provide the infrastructure in order to experiment with the tools and see what comes out with it. From pulling myself back into the role of a head of finance, right? So there are three elements that I'm typically looking at, it's the one thing is, of course, cost, right? And if there is a cost increase due to the fact that you introduce new tools, processes, systems, then the second question comes, where is the financial benefit? And I would say that's maybe an area that's more difficult to answer right now. However, what we, let's say, intentionally have decided, let's really move with the innovation, let's give it the space, let the people experiment with it and find out where it is useful or maybe where it is more practical to use these tools. That's the one thing. Second thing is, of course, productivity. And when you go through the entire value chain of our company, it starts with the R&D pipeline. Yeah? So globally, we are investing around year on year 14 billion Swiss francs. And of course, you can ask yourself the question, it's the spend is the one thing, but how do you get the best out of the, and in the end, the proof of concept is what comes out as an approved product out of the R&D pipeline. And that's, of course, one area where we as a corporation have a very strong focus on where can we innovate with these tools in order to make our trials faster, also the likelihood of being successful to increase that. And then the third thing is, of course, can you create value? Yeah, and value creation really comes for like our product development. I mean, if you are faster and bringing innovation into the hands of patients who are in need of a treatment at lower cost, that's then the holy grail, I would say, yeah. But very specifically, how did I start? Yeah, that was your question. It's simply every day, right? So trying to also use large language models, trying also, and typically I think that's maybe a little bit the kind of gray zone when we talk about AI, because that's now the name of the game. Very often we mean robotics and automation, right? But still there, I think there's a lot of opportunity in the finance space to use that more often and really to shift from collecting, crunching, interpreting data into really automating these parts of the processes and really freeing up the time where it really adds value in really generating insights, really sitting together with your business partners, really strategizing about the way forward. And I would say these are the three elements that are relevant for me, but I also would argue to say maybe in terms of maturity, we are not yet there where we would like to be. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Massimo.
Okay, I don't want to repeat much what my peers said, but yeah, for us was also a wake-up call when ChatGPT became widely available for us. The first point was how we protect IP, how we prevent that people will go and use their own personal ChatGPT profile to start sharing corporate information. So the first thing we do is creating our own chat box internally, mostly developing our internal data to develop our own LLM. So you basically have this tool that gives you all the information possible. Man, I think we're going to talk later how we standardize and compartmental the data that accessible internally. But the idea was really, let's give them a tool which is good enough and get all insights out of the information within Ʀᴏ. And that was implemented basically mid last year. But the main point, chemical industry, and I'm talking about specifically on this, and I want to talk probably a little bit later, has been highly volatile over the last probably 5 years. Let's say starting the first trade war, first Trump mandate. And what we started using, not really AI, but machine learning, was trying to improve the way we read the market we're playing in and improving the way we forecast and we do planning. For us, that was the clear direction and trajectory where we want to go, because fundamentally, the whole industry is heavily pressed by pricing strategies by competitors, heavy competition. So you want really to read your reality, your market, your industry the best you can, the best you could, and that tool was probably the best way we could have a better understanding and basically kill the bias that normally you have when you got individual and personal understanding of the business and planning. So the idea is really to run pilots in few areas, the critical areas of the company, to start understanding, to start testing tools and understanding how they react in reading the history and embedding data and leading indicators out of the market to generate a better planning. I'm sure you're going to talk more about this, but the real we found a niche where we can basically leverage AI and ML, and we still have a pilot. If you question where we stand, we're still at a pilot stage, but the early results are quite promising.
Okay, if we okay, we talked about Gen AI, but coming back to traditional AI and even maybe RPA and so on. How did you all start with your people? Because we are finance people, we are accountants, but we are not geeks. So how did you do? How did you train your people? Did you hire? Did you hire consultants? So, what did you do? Yeah. And what do you recommend?
Yeah. So there is definitely a change management that needs to take place. And it starts not only with the colleagues and the employees, but also with the board. You would be surprised, I mean, you're probably here because you are interested and you're like, very engaged with AI, but not everyone is, and there are fears. And the less people know about AI, the more fear there is. And it starts with the board, I would say, to be able to convince certain people that, yeah, we may be very grounded, not artificial, but we need intelligence, and we need really, advanced tools. And then in terms of change management, the fear that you have read everywhere is like, am I going to lose my job? Right, and it's true. It's like very impressive when you see what's coming out of this certain model. And here, what it is about is really about giving the tool and convincing people to use it and to use it to enhance their own productivity. And productivity means more time, right? Because we all have things to do that are boring, take a lot of time, and you can accelerate. And when people realize that, they say, like, wow, that's really the best tool I ever had, right? And it goes from translation to summary to, writing a brief to, many tasks can be, enhanced and really accelerated. So then people start to be more convinced. What we did was to create buddies, like digital buddies. So we have volunteers, 70 of them in the organization. And they are here as volunteers to help, to train, and to, basically bring the good usage of the technology. And that has helped a lot. But I think, really showing people how it can help their daily life is the key, right? So I've got an example with a person in R&D. And hey, have you used we ask tool? Oh, no, this is going to take my job, I say, well, have you read, the research paper that was published on this topic? Oh, no, I haven't had the time to do it. Well, why don't you take it, drag it in the box, and ask, the Gen AI to summarize it and translate it in German? And in 5 seconds, she had the 15 lines that she needed. And she was very impressed, and she said, wow, this is going to save me a lot of time. I start to like that, So if you can prove that and help people, people will use AI.
But to go up the learning curve, did you upskill your people? Did you train them? Did you hire people? Did you take consultants?
Yeah, so we do. No, so internally it's been done, with a lot of training, a lot of example, of course, video online that people can access. There is a prompt example on how you can use it. What we wanted to do was also like a game, a competition of how to best use it. So yeah, you try to create a momentum, but the truth is we follow the usage, right? And we follow the usage week by week and by token, and you can see it. It's exponential. So when you see that, you say, okay, it's people are using it, right?
Thank you, Denis. How did you embrace it with your people?
I would say it consists of 3 different dimensions. Yeah, that the one is really to acknowledge that change is there and that there is something good in that change. Yeah, so it really starts with a tone at the top that you really make it part of the conversation. Might it be an individual conversation, team meetings, but also in town halls. Yeah, and then really from a positive aspect to really share success stories, right? To really also make it very practical. Let also team members talk about use cases, about pain points, and how these like AI tools tools have helped to resolve it or to improve the situation. So to really make it tangible, that's the one thing. Second thing is really also, and I couldn't agree more with you, Raphael, in finance there are certain, let's say, elements that are non-negotiable, right? When it comes to tax declaration, when it comes to financial disclosures, investors' relations, I mean, that there's no tolerance for error, right? So it's really also important to map out in which area do you allow for experimentation, yeah, and where do you also have flexibility, and where it's not the case, yeah. So also when I talk to colleagues, like really in the accounting department, in financial external communication, of course there's less area for flexibility, right? So they're also more on the conservative side. But internally, when it comes to like business partnering, when it comes to scenario management, to forecasting, to prediction, that's really where you can experiment. And I think it's very important to have the human in the loop. So that's really inevitable. And that brings me to the third level, which is really you need to make sure that the folks, they're really literate when it comes to how to use the tools, where are the limitations when it comes to hallucinations, when it comes to certain technical limitation of the tools. So three areas, really talk about it, really also make sure that you have a clear mapped out kind of overview of your organization where you want to experiment and where you rather need to wait that the tools are more on a mature level, and then really also to offer the support. Yeah, and that's typically where organizations tend to say it costs a lot of money, right? So you can bring in an army of people doing education programs. So what we specifically did, and that's the advantage always of a large organization, you have a variety of different people, right? So you have young people that are really, let's say, curious, that are really eager to delve into that topic. So what we just simply did is to form a squad of 5 people, really asking them come up with a training concept. And that's what he did. And now it's pretty much, it got so much momentum that you have, let's say, a community of enthusiasts. Yeah? So they have their own web page. They work on different modules. It starts from very simple, what to understand when it comes to data management, up to really how these very complex tools are working and where you can use them. So these are the 3 areas how we started. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, for my experience, and I'll build on Danny's point. So when the question is how you basically, what we did to get the people on board. And when you come out to bring people on board, you observe 2 reactions. The enthusiasts, which we were mentioning, so it's mostly generation divide, if you want. So the youngest generation, very curious, very enthusiastic about this. And then you got another area of the population in the company, most externally, that they push back because of concern, because they cannot really understand the depth of the tool. So what we did, we are still behind, if I may say, be totally blunt. So what we do, we offered a full training, but just on voluntary basis. So we didn't have a push program to get training. We got the training available internally. It's mostly online training. But then they created exact same thing. We created a kind of a pool of volunteers that was basically involved in the pilot I was mentioning in my intervention before. They can leverage the tool that we are developing, and so basically they will be the change agents that also Raphael was mentioning. So we want really to create a kind of environment that push the embracement of AI in the organization. We're not there yet, to be completely honest. We're still learning. We're still understanding how can we deploy the AI capability within the whole side of organization. Finance specifically is still not fully involved. So we were talking mostly about planning that we focus, but that's basically just the first step.
Okay, thank you. So we are finance people, and we like to talk about ROI. So let me ask you, Raphael and colleagues, did you look into quantitative ROI or more into qualitative, having people more happy, doing more interesting tasks? So, and what are your KPIs for success?
Yeah. So that's a tricky one. So, you know, there was this study, I don't know if you have read it, about the BCG, and like 1 year ago already, they did a study about, you know, consultant with ChatGPT kind of, and consultant without, and they measure they measure kind of a productivity. Anyone has read this study or this article? No? So essentially, their conclusion was that they assumed there was a 40% improvement in productivity, right, for consultants, which is huge, right? So, and then the next, was well, maybe consulting has some worries, to be considered, but essentially 40% change, right? So if you consider how much you spend in personal expense and you take 40% of that, and if you've got break even on that, it's already good. 40% of your personal expense is huge, right? So we will never spend that. So there was kind of a leap of faith. That's what I want to say at the beginning, when you assume there could be some 10 or 20% improvement in productivity. But the way we see it, so a bit of a leap of faith at the beginning, but the way we see it is really, a company is as good as its people, as good as its team, and if you don't grow every year, the next year is not going to be better. Right? So if you want to grow the company, you need to make sure that the people individually are better, so that they learn something new, they apply something new, and they need to apply new tools, right? And so that was the first layer, I would say. The second layer, we are thinking more in terms of more practical usage, and one is, indeed, material flow and inventory management and planning. So planning, predictive analytics, and here, it's the same, right? You consider your inventory, your working capital. If you can gain 5% of that, that's how much you can spend in AI project. So I do it the other way, right? I don't do it, I spend X and therefore I need to get Y. I say, well, if I believe I could get 5% improvement, it gives me Y to spend to break even. So then let's do it. And maybe it's going to be even better than that. So if you're on the safe side, right? So we are not there at a very sophisticated business case because we don't know. But I think it's so important to try. And what we have seen so far is that we have more good surprise than bad surprise, right? So that's a very pragmatic approach, I would say. Okay.
What about you? Your ROI, qualitative, quantitative?
I would say it's a very complex topic. Yeah. So it's let me break it down, right? So like in my area of operations, I mean, we are running pretty much 4 billion in assets just on the headquarters side, right? So these are R&D assets, these are manufacturing assets, and of course, what we're doing with every new construction project, we build in sensors and really to enable those assets to really use the tools that will be available later on. Yes, there is a positive ROI, but it's really difficult to calculate that through in a way that you can say exactly with a specific AI solution it delivers you 20, 30, 40% of return on investment. But what it helps you, it builds in the opportunity to improve your productivity going forward, right? That's point number one. Second point is, of course, in very, let's say, specific operational areas like manufacturing, that's maybe easier to capture the value that you're creating, right? If you have faster manufacturing runs, if they're first time right when you release them, when you have also less reiterations in terms of your production cycles, you can maybe optimize your preventative maintenance program. All these kind of things lead to direct value capturing, right? But in the area that is maybe more something directly in finance that I'm managing, when I mentioned my team of 20 people, I on purpose don't really put the ROI topic out there, right? Because in the overhead space, and we talked about also maybe not so much about barriers of adoption, because now we are assuming AI is at the maturity level where everyone has pretty much acknowledged it's part of a modern kind of operation of a modern business. However, there might be still some invisible barriers of adoption, right? And so therefore I also wouldn't really put it out as I need to see in white collar operations a return on investment straight away, right? So, and as you said, Raphael, of course, I mean, on a daily business, I'm also using large language models, for instance, when you get a new policy, when you get maybe certain documents, right? You can upload, you can ask for the summary of it. It easily saves you time, but will I reduce my working time? Not really, right? It just leads to that I maybe free up my time, invest it somewhere else. So therefore, it's more qualitative when it is more on the overhead side of the operations, in terms of like which is more tangible, manufacturing. On the operations, that's much closer to say you have a specific expectation of what should be the return on investment. So therefore, I think it could be easily a thesis or maybe a kind of a long conversation around the topic.
Good, Massimo.
quantitative ROI, but impossible to measure. That's that's the short answer. So, a quick background. I mentioned chemical industry. It's heavily human-driven. So there's a lot of prone error processes. It's very, let's say, traditional conservative, which means basically old-fashioned. So the idea was really, this tool is, we really believe this tool is here to stay. It was mentioned for those who speak Italian in the earlier panel. We basically understood that this could be a game changer in the way we run our operations. That's to your last point. So we are planning to implement AI in the way that it changed the way we make planning, we make manufacturing, the way we interact with our first-tier peers, mainly vendors, because we want to get rid of all the manual intervention that gives error, gives bias, and basically has a huge impact on our P&L and our balance sheet. Rafael was mentioning inventory, which is the first more immediate area where we see the early improvement. Also the idea where we focus our R&D, the way we understand our competitors move from leading indicators we were mentioning before. So clearly, the intervention that we plan to implement in AXO that we've seen all across the broader chemical industry, probably all the manufacturing, is on the way we operate. Where's final stake here? Final stake is basically the next step, because if you got a good operations and you got reliable data, you got reliable processes, ultimately you got good data in, and that's to me where basically AI can leverage the finance function, because if you spend nowadays, or until 2 years ago, you spend a huge amount of money or time to collect data, validate the data, trust the data if you want, and then you need to make a message of the data. If that process gets short and it gets much more reliable, then you got a much more strategic approach that finance can take overall.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Just to, because, what I've seen with AI use case or implementation, it's very different in terms of cost than when you do an ERP, or ERP or big system. And the technology is open, right? I mean, at least the one we are using. So you don't pay license fee. And that's a huge difference, right? So what you pay is pretty much the same when you do any system implementation, is internal time or external time of consultant, but that you can manage. But the big difference is you don't pay license fee. And that makes, usually, I mean, what we have done has been in a very, no comparison whatsoever with the ERP implementation. So therefore, hey, we can go fast, we can have improvement on a wide range of application, and it doesn't take 18 months and cost 15 million, or, you have all heard of a crazy story about the ERP implementation, right? So therefore the ROI, is you are more willing to take a leap of faith on this in this context, right?
Which brings me to a question around what you just said. We have put millions, sort of billions, into legacy systems, ERPs, best of breed, purchasing systems, HR systems, and so on. And now we all talk about AI, Gen AI, and so on. So what do we do with the legacy systems? And what do you tell your CEO when you say, "Oh, wow, we have to, we have to change completely"? And how do you make the move? Maybe we can take an example. When we talk about Gen AI, generative AI makes us think, oh, wow, maybe we can do forecasting, planning for our business, for our cash, and so on. So how do you, and so far you were using ERPs and best-of-breed systems, and now you can use these new tools. So how do you move from one to the other without saying, okay, let's get rid of all these old systems? So yeah.
So the way I see it, it's a good question for the people at the booth on SAP, right? I think it's a real question, but the way I see it is those, Oracle, SAP, those ERP, essentially they generate data, right? They are mostly transaction system. I mean, they all have now layers of intelligence for sure, but they generate a lot of data, and your OpenAI or whatever AI system will never work without data. So really, you need to generate a lot of data for planning. You know, you've got many SKUs, so you need to use this data in as structural way as possible to teach your model and then to use it again. So definitely, it's not wasted money, I think. But I think there is a question indeed, for the ERP industry about, what does it mean, right? But that's, hopefully it's not going to increase the cost again. But
so what are you doing with your past investments? Are you getting rid of everything and going to AI?
I mean, the good thing is it's not my personal responsibility, so
that was too easy.
Therefore, I can be relaxed about it. But the thing is, I have a personal view on it, right? And I mean, the thing is also, it's then the question at what level of a company of the size do you need a certain structure behind it, right? So of course, there's always advancement, and with AI, there will be new innovation cycles coming very quickly, right? However, the big question is then, when you think of huge corporations, I mean, there's certain security aspects you need to consider, right? There's also a question, how far can you decipher the processes to really understand how you came to an outcome? So that's really where I still see the advantage in a more transactional-based ERP landscape, right? Because already today it's very, very complex. Yeah, when you talk about, like in our case, a company of 100,000 people, more than 60 billion in revenue, being in 160 different markets across the globe. But the thing is, you can still understand the flow, right? It's still reconcilable where the input is coming from, how the input was processed. And in the best case, it's not always the case, or sometimes it takes a lot of, let's say, effort to get there. But still, technically, that's possible. Whereas on the AI side of things, it's sometimes not so clear when you're confronted with an outcome, how was the processing in between, right? So the real end-to-end traceability of how an information, of how a data set was processed. Yeah, so that's maybe my personal view on it. And then the other point is, of course, I mean, you never can really predict innovation cycles if they really become completely disruptive. I mean, that's, of course, where you as a company have to say, is it putting my competitive edge at risk? And then, of course, you have to take, even if it's painful, even if it's expensive, have to take the specific measures, right, to catch up again with where you want to be, or where, let's say, at least the state of the art is, yeah.
Massimo.
So you're talking to a guy that when he first joined his first company was using the Jurassic Park version, which is AS400. So that's an interesting question. So clearly, yeah, that's the younger generation probably won't know what is that. So where are we going? Again, right, this is a question to the SAP, to Oracle, although they're already providing version with AI, probably on top of this, say, legacy product on it. Where I see that, my view, and this is my view, you still need to have a strong architecture, because as Raphael was mentioning, you are entering a huge amount of data. For large corporations, the 3 ones on stage, you need to enter a huge amount of data, and then you need a structure infrastructure when to enter the data. What I see the direction is that you will have more and more AI embedded in order to, first of all, facilitate the data entry, to connect data sitting in different sources, because you got emails, you got whatever kind of message, WhatsApp messages, and the current trend of agentic AIs is facilitating the connection and streamline of data sitting in different sources which don't talk to each other. And that's probably the next step that I see. So as I see, probably in the future, you have a much easier way to embed data into the system, because honestly, let's say we're using the German provider, and it's still quite old-fashioned the way you need to enter data in SAP. So I think if we make it easier and make more flexible and more dynamic will be great. And then the way you get data out based on your needs, by probably where it's going to be the next step. Long term, we probably the ERP as we know it today would disappear. Will probably be much more fluid and dynamic, but it's probably few years from now.
Okay, thank you. So you talked about data. Maybe we should talk about the prerequisite to be successful with AI. And so what did you have to do in terms of data, in terms of processes? Because if we jump too fast into AI, we know lots of projects which have failed in AI. So how do you ensure that you don't fail? What are the prerequisites? We talked about people, but what else should we look for?
Yeah. So the way we think of it, is to make it like really fast, fast and small scope, so that we limit the risk, right? And we learn actually. So it's a learning process, right? So, and for example, what we have done, we said, okay, where do we have data? Because that's really the oil. Where do we have data? What can we? And we say, oh, we've got lots of R&D data, and that's an example where we train our chatbot, R&D chatbot, with 100 years of data, any kind of data on R&D. And now this chatbot, you ask, hey, can you give me a recipe for a formulation for a natural shampoo with rosemary oil? And 5 seconds, you're gonna have like a proposal, right? So the work of the R&D team, was extremely accelerated with that. But I think it's really make sure you've got data as good quality data as possible. The topic we are reaching now is, who can use those tools. Especially in R&D, that was the case. We want to have only the R&D people to access this tool, because then you have all of the repository of all of the knowledge. But in finance, it's a key topic, right? If I start to upload all of the finance data from the past 3 years with all of the details into a model, and anyone can have access to it, it's not great. So the question for us is now, how do we have the right segregation of duty, or the right, separation of access, or the right, limitation of, knowledge. In fact, it's a bit sad, but you cannot share everything to everyone, and that's where we are bumping a bit our head right now.
Okay, what about you?
Yeah, maybe to build on that, I would say there are certain things, right? We talked about like resources, processes, capability of people, right? So these are the kind of, let's say, hygiene factors that have to be there in order to be successful. And the other dimension, I would say, it's really, and we've seen it with a lot of disruptive innovations or new technologies, is there's always this wave of enthusiasm, right? So that's really, you see it also now here, AI is everywhere, right? So everyone is taking a genuine interest in there, but there will be also the time when it slows down a little bit, because maybe the first reality checks have been done, and then this kind of, let's say, enthusiasm slows down a bit. So I would say what's very specifically important is really to look at where are the tangible outcomes if you use that technology. And for us, the approach is always look at where the pain points are in order to really make it relevant in the context of the people, right? So if you have pain points in terms of I need to write 20 emails a day with a lot of content, and maybe the tool can help me with that, right? Or need to read through a lot of regulations and guidelines, and the tool can summarize it for me. So these are very specific benefits that can be demonstrated, where people then feel that there's really something that where the tools help me with it. And I think that will be very important to really make sure that the momentum doesn't slow down here.
Okay, thank you.
Building on both intervention, I think the things is twofold. When you talk about data and reliability of account of data, first of all is the data set where you train your LM. So it needs to be pre-validated. So you make sure, decently sure, that then the outcome is kind of reliable. And then the situation flips, because at the end you got a good LLM, and then it can help you a lot dealing with data which are not super reliable. And my experience in the two companies I've been working for is they both grew by acquisition. So you get a huge amount of data which are not consistent to each other, elements or system, etc. So it was impossible to navigate it to get a fully reliable outcome. So what we see in AkzoNobel and also outside is that good AI tools can help you streamline the data. if you're well trained before, and that's probably the best immediate benefit that you can get, because until now we've been basically losing a lot of human time and cost. We're talking about costing with people sitting in GBS in various parts of the globe trying to make sense out of the data because we're completely inconsistent to each other. That would be a great benefit, and this is happening now. I was mentioning agentic AIs. That will be a great benefit probably already in 2025, and that's one of the things that, back to the earlier question on ERPs and systems, where new ERPs can really get a benefit immediately.
Okay, thank you. By the way, if you have one or two questions, don't hesitate. We can take questions. Let's talk about us. You are here because you have embraced AI and you have accepted to be panelists. But what about the other ones who are not really into AI? And or maybe the question would be, now that when you hire new people in your teams, or when you want to promote people in your teams, what do you look for in people?
So it's a bit of a different topic. So for me, I mean, linked to that is curiosity. Very important, people who are passionate, because if you are passionate and you are curious about what you are doing, you're going to see AI as a fantastic opportunity, right? And I mean, you're going to start discussing and digging, and when we presented this R&D chatbot to the head of R&D, she was like, "Wow, can I get the cost of the formulation as well?" Yes, you can. Could I get the specification? Could I get the ingredients? Yes, And you get this. You want to have this, this intellectual curiosity that's going to make the best usage, right? Because at the end of the day, it's just a tool. If you don't have and that's why no one is going to lose their job. Everyone is going to have greater, better job actually, and much more fun job. So you want to have this passion, right? That's what I think is helpful.
Okay, we have only a few minutes left. So how about the new profile of CFOs and the new profile of people you're hiring? And do you want them to, for example, to know about IFRS standards, or you don't care because they can go on Gen AI and which can tell them which standard to use? So how much is expertise, accounting expertise? How much is
Should I go first? I think it's a mix of it, right? So the first thing is, of course, you need to have really profiles that are really open-minded, that really embrace the change, and that are also really willing to be a part of that journey, right? On the other hand, it doesn't really mean that it disrupts the world in a way that no experience is any longer needed. It's just the opposite, right? Because like being dependent on tools, it also requires a certain level, not only curiosity, but also critical thinking, right? To really also trying to dive deeper to understand how did you arrive at the outcome. Right, so it's really important. I mean, it's more moving away from, let's say, financial transactional kind of world that it was in the past, more towards like a chief value officer. Yeah, really, how can I create a value proposition, and then also understanding what are the drivers behind it. So I think it's really coming down to what is really needed is critical thinking and also constructive thinking. So I think these are really the key success factors for the future. Yeah.
Very fast. I like your provocation. I think hard skills is still where we still need it. So yeah, AI will be a good benefit, but you need to have hard skills. So you need to know IFRS, etc. I want to add just a point to just not to repeat. I think more and more of the new roles and new functions will need a huge degree of flexibility and cross-functional collaboration. So the old financial analyst, supply planner kind of role that we are still used to, we probably I don't want to disappear, but will change and evolve. So you need to understand what your role will have impacted the overall organization. So I think that especially for the people that start their own career right now, having a huge degree of flexibility and willing to understand not just the role, but how the overall organization works, it will probably be paramount, because it will more and more, the old repetitive job will probably disappear over time. So you need to have kind of a strategic approach and a flexible approach.
Okay, we only have a few seconds left. I'm going to ask you, going back at what you've done, if you have to give one recommendation to your peers when they start with AI, what would be one recommendation, or what did you do wrong, or so one recommendation, 2 words.
You know what I would say? I would say really start. Don't. It's a real tool that everyone needs to have on the top of the agenda. Don't hesitate. I mentioned the cost because I had a question. You know, how much does that cost, and is it a barrier? I would say the barrier is really more the people that you have, and really you need to go on the bandwagon. You need to start it. You need to build your own model because this is going to be a competitive advantage. And you know,
it was one word.
Everyone is doing it.
One word, 2 words.
Don't wait for the wake-up call.
Okay.
Go for it.
And I would add one last thing: talk to your peers, because we all think that your neighbor is doing better, but when you talk to your peers, you realize they are not better than you. Okay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, panelists.